The Wyoming wind carried the scent of smoke and death across the prairie as rancher Samuel Crawford rode toward the overturned wagon that had been reported by one of his hands. At 52, Samuel had seen enough frontier violence to know what he was likely to find, but nothing could have prepared him for the emotional impact of what awaited him. The wagon had been attacked by raiders 3 days earlier, its occupants apparently killed and their belongings scattered across the grassland. Samuel had come to see if there were any survivors to help or bodies to bury, fulfilling the grim duty that frontier neighbors owed each other. But as he approached the wreckage, he heard something that made him rein in his horse and listen carefully. The sound of quiet sobbing coming from beneath the overturned wagon. Dismounting quickly, Samuel crawled under the wagon bed and found a boy of perhaps 10 years old, huddled in the small space with a canteen and some hardtack that had somehow escaped the raiders' notice. The child was thin from 3 days without proper food, his clothes torn and dirty, but his eyes were alert and intelligent. What struck Samuel like a physical blow was the boy's appearance. Sandy brown hair, green eyes, a stubborn set to his jaw that spoke of determination despite his desperate circumstances. The resemblance was so strong that Samuel felt his breath catch in his throat. "It's all right, son," Samuel said gently, extending his hand toward the frightened child. "You're safe now." The boy studied Samuel's face carefully before accepting his help to crawl out from under the wagon. "Are you hurt?" Samuel asked, checking the child for injuries. "No, sir," the boy replied, his voice hoarse from thirst. "Just scared and hungry." As Samuel gave the boy water and food from his own supplies, he couldn't stop staring at the child's face. The resemblance to his own son, Michael, who had died of fever 5 years earlier, was uncanny. Same hair, same eyes, even the same way of tilting his head when he was thinking. "What's your name, son?" Samuel asked. "Peter Jameson, sir. My ma and pa." The boy's voice broke as he gestured toward two graves that had been hastily dug near the wagon. Samuel looked at the fresh graves and felt his heart clench with sympathy. This child had not only survived a terrifying attack, but had also buried his own parents with his small hands. "Who did this, Peter?" "I don't know, sir. Men with painted faces, riding fast horses. They came at dawn when Pa was hitching up the team." Peter's voice was steady, but Samuel could see the trauma in his eyes. "I hid under the wagon like Ma told me to. I heard the shooting, and then everything was quiet." Samuel studied the boy who had shown such courage and resourcefulness in the face of unimaginable tragedy. Peter had survived 3 days alone on the prairie, had buried his parents, and had maintained enough composure to conserve his limited supplies while waiting for help. "He looks like my boy who died," Samuel said quietly, more to himself than to Peter. "Sir?" Peter asked, not understanding. Samuel looked at this brave child who bore such a striking resemblance to his own lost son and felt something stir in his chest that had been dormant for 5 years, the desire to protect and nurture. "Peter," Samuel said gently, "do you have any other family? Anyone who would be expecting you?" The boy shook his head. "Ma and Pa said we were going to Oregon Territory to start fresh, said we didn't have any relatives left back in Kansas." Samuel realized he was looking at a child who was completely alone in the world, just as he had been alone since losing his wife and son to fever. The symmetry of their situations wasn't lost on him. "What's going to happen to me now?" Peter asked, his young voice carrying a fear that he was trying hard to hide. Samuel looked at this remarkable boy who had survived tragedy with such dignity and felt a decision crystallizing in his mind. "Peter," he said carefully, "how would you feel about coming to live with me? I have a ranch not far from here, and I could use someone to help with the horses and cattle." Peter's eyes widened with hope and suspicion in equal measure. "You mean it, sir? You'd really take me in?" "I mean it," Samuel replied firmly. "You remind me of someone very special, and I think maybe we could help each other." Subscribe to our channel for more incredible frontier stories. You won't believe how this act of kindness heals to broken hearts. As Samuel helped Peter gather the few belongings that had survived the attack, both of them understood that this chance meeting was more than just a rescue. For Peter, it meant safety, security, and the possibility of a new family. For Samuel, it meant a chance to channel his grief into something positive, to honor his dead son's memory by caring for a living child who needed him. But neither of them realized how much healing lay ahead, or how challenging it would be for a grief-stricken man to open his heart again, and for a traumatized boy to trust in the possibility of love. After loss, the ride back to Samuel's ranch was quiet, with Peter riding double behind the older man, both of them lost in their own thoughts about what the future might hold. The physical resemblance between Peter and Michael was remarkable, but Samuel was beginning to understand that the boy's true value lay not in how much he looked like someone else, but in who he was himself, brave, intelligent, and desperately in need of the love and guidance that Samuel was ready to provide. The wagon attack had taken Peter's parents and destroyed his previous life, but it had also brought him to a man who understood loss and was ready to build something new from the ashes of grief. 6 months had passed since Samuel Crawford had found Peter Jameson beneath the overturned wagon, and life at the Double C Ranch had settled into a routine that surprised both of them. With its comfort and natural rhythm, Peter had proven to be everything Samuel had hoped: intelligent, hardworking, and eager to learn everything about ranch life. But the healing process hadn't been without its challenges. Peter still woke some nights from nightmares about the attack, and Samuel often found himself staring at the boy's face, seeing his lost son Michael in every expression and gesture. The resemblance remained uncanny, and Samuel struggled with the complex emotions of grief, hope, and the fear of caring too much about someone he might lose again. "Mr. Crawford," Peter said one morning as they worked together mending fence, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course, son," Samuel replied, though he tensed slightly at the serious tone in Peter's voice. "You said I look like your boy who died. What was he like?" Samuel paused in his work, his hands tightening on the fence wire. In 6 months, this was the first time Peter had directly asked about Michael. He was a lot like you. "Actually," Samuel said slowly, "curious about everything, always asking questions, always wanting to help with the ranch work even when he was too small to be much use." "How did he die?" The simple question hit Samuel harder than he'd expected. "Fever, 5 years ago. He was 8 years old." Peter was quiet for a moment, absorbing this information. "Is that why you took me in? Because I remind you of him?" Samuel realized this was one of the most important conversations they'd ever have, and his answer would shape their relationship going forward. "That's how it started." Samuel admitted honestly, "When I first saw you, the resemblance was so strong. It took my breath away. But Peter, that's not why I kept you." "Why did you keep me?" "Because you're not Michael," Samuel said, surprising them both with his directness. "You're Peter Jameson, and you're brave and smart and funny in ways that are completely your own. I kept you because I came to love you for who you are, not for who you remind me of." Peter's face lit up with a smile that Samuel had rarely seen. "Since the wagon attack, really, Samuel confirmed. "You're not a replacement for my son, Peter. You're a gift that helped me remember how much I have to offer as a father." Their moment of connection was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Samuel looked up to see 3 riders coming toward them at a steady pace, and something about their purposeful approach made him instinctively step closer to Peter. The lead rider was a well-dressed man in his 40s, flanked by 2 younger men who had the look of hired guns. As they drew closer, Samuel could see that the leader wore expensive clothes and rode a fine horse, suggesting wealth and authority. "Are you Samuel Crawford?" the man called out as he reined in his horse. "I am," Samuel replied cautiously. "What can I do for you?" "My name is Richard Jameson," the man said, dismounting. "I believe you have my nephew." Samuel felt his blood turn cold as he understood the implications. Richard Jameson, Peter's uncle, a relative the boy had never mentioned. Peter stepped slightly behind Samuel, his face pale with recognition and fear. "Uncle Richard," Peter said quietly, "I thought you were dead." "Not dead, boy, just busy building a business empire in California," Richard replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "When I heard about your parents' death and your miraculous survival, I came as quickly as I could." Samuel studied Richard Jameson carefully. noting the calculating look in his eyes, the way his gaze assessed the ranch and its obvious prosperity, the casual arrogance in his manner. "Peter's been well cared for here," Samuel said firmly. "He's part of my family now." "I'm sure he has been," Richard replied smoothly. "And I'm grateful for your kindness. But Peter is a Jameson, and he belongs with his blood family." "I don't want to go with you," Peter said suddenly, his young voice clear and determined. "I want to stay here with Mr. Crawford." Richard's smile became more forced. "Peter, you don't understand. I can offer you opportunities that a simple rancher never could. Education, wealth, a chance to build something significant with your life. Subscribe to our channel now." The heart-wrenching decision that follows will test everything they've built. Together, Samuel realized that Peter was facing a choice between security with a blood relative who could provide material advantages and love with the man who had rescued and raised him. It was the kind of decision that no child should have to make. "What kind of business do you run, Mr. Jameson?" Samuel asked, stalling for time while he tried to read the situation. "Import and export," Richard replied vaguely. "Very profitable. Very demanding. Peter would learn valuable skills working with me." Something about Richard's evasiveness troubled Samuel, but he also understood that he had no legal right to keep Peter. If the boy's uncle wanted to claim him, "Peter," Samuel said gently. "What do you want to do?" Peter looked between Samuel and his uncle, clearly torn between loyalty to the man who had saved and loved him, and uncertainty about defying his only blood relative. "Can I think about it?" Peter asked. "Of course you can," Samuel replied, though Richard looked impatient with the delay. "I'll give you until tomorrow morning," Richard said. "Then we need to be heading back to California." That evening, as Samuel and Peter sat on the ranch house porch, both of them struggled with the decision they were facing. "Mr. Crawford," Peter said quietly, "what should I do?" Samuel looked at the boy who had become his son in everything but name and felt his heart breaking at the possibility of losing him. "Peter," Samuel said carefully, "I can't make this decision for you, but I can tell you that whatever you choose, I'll always love you and be proud of the young man you're becoming. Even if I leave." "Even if you leave," Samuel confirmed, though the words cost him dearly. "But Peter, I want you to think about something. Family isn't just about blood. It's also about who chooses to love you, protect you, and help you become the person you're meant to be." As they sat together under the Wyoming stars, both Samuel and Peter understood that they were facing a test of the bond they'd built over 6 months of shared work, shared meals, and shared healing from their respective traumas. The question was whether the love they'd discovered together would be strong enough to overcome the claims of blood and the promises of wealth that Richard Jameson represented. The next morning dawned gray and cold, matching the somber mood that had settled over the Double C Ranch. Samuel had barely slept, and he could tell from Peter's appearance that the boy had wrestled with his decision through the long night. Richard Jameson arrived promptly at sunrise, accompanied by his 2 hired men and a wagon loaded with supplies for the journey to California. His manner was brisk and businesslike, as if Peter's departure was already a foregone conclusion. "Well, Peter," Richard said without preamble, "have you made your decision?" Peter looked at Samuel, then back at his uncle. "Uncle Richard, can I ask you some questions first?" "Of course, boy. What do you want to know?" "What happened to the letters my pa sent you? He wrote to you every year, but you never wrote back." "Pa said you probably didn't get them." Richard's expression flickered slightly. "I've been traveling extensively for business. Mail doesn't always catch up with me. And when Ma and Pa died." "How did you find out? Who told you?" Samuel watched Richard's face carefully, noting the brief hesitation before he answered. "Word travels in business circles," Richard said vaguely. "Someone mentioned the attack." Peter nodded slowly, but Samuel could see that the boy was far from satisfied with these evasive answers. "Uncle Richard," Peter continued, "what exactly is your import and export business?" "What do you import and export?" "Various goods," Richard replied, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Peter, we don't have time for a lengthy interrogation. We need to leave soon if we're going to make California before winter." But Peter wasn't finished. Mr. Crawford taught me that honest people give straight answers to honest questions. Why won't you tell me what your business really is? Samuel felt a surge of pride at Peter's courage and intelligence. The boy was displaying the same careful judgment that had helped him survive the wagon attack. Richard's facade of patience finally cracked. Boy, I'm your uncle and your legal guardian. You don't get to interrogate me like some common criminal. But you are a criminal, aren't you? Peter said quietly. The silence that followed was electric with tension. Richard's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, while his two companions tensed for potential trouble. What did you say? Richard asked dangerously. Peter straightened his shoulders with a courage that amazed Samuel. I said you're a criminal. Last night, I remembered something. 3 years ago, a U.S. Marshal came to our farm asking about you. He said you were wanted for smuggling and theft. Pa told him he hadn't heard from you in years. Samuel realized that Peter had been testing his uncle with his questions, using the intelligence and caution that frontier life had taught him to evaluate the man's character. You little, Richard started forward angrily, but Samuel stepped between him and Peter. That's close enough, Samuel said, his hand resting on his own gun. The boys asked some fair questions, and you haven't given any straight answers. He's my nephew, Richard snapped. I have legal rights. Not if you're a wanted criminal, Samuel replied, and not if Peter chooses to stay here. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible frontier stories. You won't believe the courage this young boy shows in the face of danger. Richard's mask of civility finally fell away completely. The boy's coming with me whether he wants to or not. I need him for my business operations, and I'm not leaving empty-handed. The admission revealed Richard's true motivations. He didn't want Peter out of family love or responsibility. He wanted to use the boy for his criminal enterprises. Over my dead body, Samuel said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of finality that made smart men reconsider their options. That can be arranged, one of Richard's hired guns said, his hand moving toward his weapon. But before the situation could escalate to violence, the sound of approaching horses interrupted the confrontation. Samuel looked up to see Sheriff Morrison arriving with 3 deputies, their badges gleaming in the morning sun. Richard Jameson, Sheriff Morrison called out. You're under arrest for smuggling, theft, and conspiracy. Richard's face went white as he realized he'd been trapped. How did you? The boy sent word to me last night, Morrison explained, dismounting with his deputies. Seems he remembered some important details about his uncle's legal troubles. Samuel looked at Peter with amazement and pride. The boy had not only made his choice about where he wanted to live, but had also taken steps to protect both of them from Richard's criminal intentions. As Richard Jameson and his men were arrested and led away, Peter stood close to Samuel, watching his uncle's departure with a mixture of sadness and relief. Are you all right? Samuel asked gently. I'm fine, Peter replied. I hoped he might actually care about me, but all he wanted was to use me. Samuel knelt down to Peter's level, looking into the boy's green eyes that had shown such remarkable maturity and courage. Peter, Samuel said, I want you to know something. You showed more wisdom and bravery today than most grown men ever do. I'm proud to call you my son, really. You mean it. I mean it with all my heart. Samuel confirmed, and if you're willing, I'd like to make it official. I want to adopt you legally, so you'll always be a Crawford and always have a real home. Peter's face lit up with joy. Yes, I want that more than anything. 6 months later, Samuel Crawford stood with his legally adopted son Peter at the dedication of a small memorial they'd built near the site of the wagon attack. The memorial honored Peter's parents and the other victims of frontier violence, but it also celebrated the healing and new beginnings that could grow from tragedy. Do you think they would have approved? Peter asked, looking at the simple stone marker they'd erected for his parents. Samuel looked at the remarkable young man Peter was becoming, honest, brave, thoughtful, and kind. I think they would be very proud of the man you're growing into, he said, and I think they'd be happy that you found a family that loves you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories of healing, family, and second chances from the American frontier. Hit that subscribe button now because these tales prove that love can triumph over loss and that families are built on choice as much as blood. As they rode back to the Double C Ranch together, both Samuel and Peter understood that they'd discovered something precious. Proof that grief could be transformed into love, that loss could lead to new beginnings, and that sometimes the most important family connections were the ones you chose to make. The boy who looked like Samuel's dead son had become something far more valuable, a living reminder that love was stronger than loss, and that second chances at fatherhood could be even more meaningful than first ones. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these incredible tales of frontier family and healing to life. Subscribe now and join us for more amazing stories that prove the strongest bonds are forged through choice, love, and shared courage.